So I'm just prepping for my interview this upcoming week with Roger Jackson, who wrote Rebirth, a guide to mind, karma, and cosmos in the Buddhist world. And this is just, I can't tell you how much of a geek I am for this kind of thing. Now, Jackson's book is relatively technical. I mean, he brings together sources from a lot of different places. And if you know anything about Buddhism, you know that the amount of texts and the length of texts that are present in the varying schools is extensive, beyond extensive. Multitudinous, voluminous, whatever adjective you want to say, it's a lot. I guess that's a good thing for anyone that's interested. It's also daunting. And so I think it's just important to appreciate, when a scholar is able to assimilate so many different streams and resources to present them to us common folk, you could say. So thank you, Roger, for doing that. And just getting into this book, I can tell you, it amazes me just how all of the thinkers, specifically in India, I'm sure other places and regions for a long time as well, but just specifically because that's the Buddhism is from the Indian tradition, just how they wrestled with so many of the same questions we have about consciousness today. I mean, the questions are nearly the same, and the Buddhist philosophical project is so much to distinguish itself from other thinkers at that time, other yogis or philosophies or expressions of the religious life, for lack of a better word. And it just astounds me how much effort and intense depth was poured into these questions. So I just want to take a moment to appreciate that. This is just a profound history here. And I think Professor Jackson does a great job at just, being able to elucidate that as he sets up this book. So I want to share a quote here. Just going back to the distinctions that Buddha and his followers were compelled to make about their distinct path of practice. When it comes to rebirth, there's a worldview that is present, of course, that Roger Jackson talks about in his book. He sets it up, meaning he talks about the contextual factors and the cultural moment that the historical Buddha was present in, and the class that he was a part of, specifically coming out of the Upanishadic movement. And what really characterizes the Buddhist teachings, and I'll get to the quote in a second, is not just rebirth, which isn't unique per se to the school of Buddhism. It's what Jackson calls a karmic eschatology. An eschatology is basically a progression to the end. What does this mean in Christianity? We have the eschatology is really about the end of days, the second coming, things like this. in the context of a karmic eschatology, we're talking about the process of rebirth that exists without beginning or end, and it includes a soteriology, which is the study of it's the word we use basically for salvation, and that comes from the Christian tradition. However, in Buddhism, if we're applying that lens, soteriology means liberation. So the Buddhist worldview is not so different from many practices that were arising in that particular period in India that were focused on liberation from cyclical existence. But the Buddha had a particular framing for this. And to me, the key component of that framing, really there's two aspects to it. And again, Professor Jackson talks about this. We have the aspect of dependent, or sometimes what's called interdependent origination, Paticca Samuppada. Everything depends on causes and conditions that are multifactorial. They can't be linearly explained per se, although everything that's happening, any potential phenomena, is a result of causes and conditions. So this is really held in place by how Buddha described karma. And karma being the fulcrum, the personal fulcrum, we could say, through which our temporal being unfolds in a complex manifestation of causes and conditions. So we have here chapter 6 from Dr. Jackson's work. And here he's discussing karma. So I'll just look at these highlighted portions for now. As should already be evident, the why of rebirth is found above all in the notion of karma. So karma literally translates to action. Actions of body, speech, and mind that may be either wholesome or unwholesome, and whose results are commensurate with the quality of actions performed. Now, within this worldview, those results may be experienced either immediately or later in one's present life or in a future life. Okay, so karma here, it just, we're just setting it up as actions of body, speech, and mind that have a result. So there's cause and effect in the context of our mind-body complex stream, we could say. So here we have karma may also be understood as the moral application of the universal law of dependent origination, in that it indexes a causal sequence in which, from a particular sort of ethically weighted cause, comes a particular appropriate experience result. So I'm not going to be able to unpack this entirely in this short little video. Let's just say here, for Buddha, dependent origination is his teaching. And what that means for us is that our actions matter. They produce results. And this is what Jackson's saying in terms of the moral application and ethically weighted. When he uses this word, from a particular sort of ethically weighted cause comes a particular appropriate experienced result. So what this means is that everything we do matters. You see, one of the greatest dangers, according to Buddhism, is the fall towards nihilism, which is often associated with a materialist viewpoint in terms of consciousness. Although, maybe there are other viewpoints that could be nihilistic. Why is nihilism dangerous? Well, nihilism is dangerous because it rejects the idea that what we do matters. It's dangerous because there's no sense, there's a denial of cause and effect, and thus karma. And thus, whatever I do, I could go out and kill 1 million people, and so what? Doesn't matter. I could pollute the planet and destroy entire species, so what? Who cares? It doesn't matter. My actions don't matter. It's not just that I'm hurting others from this perspective. There's also the implication that I'm hurting myself and my future quality of the stream of my body-mind complex, my consciousness. Meaning, if I act out of, we could say, ignorance, wrong view, according to Buddhism, really, we could say the 3 poisons: ignorance, hatred, greed. Then the result that I get in terms of my mental continuum, my mind stream, is I'm going to proliferate or reinforce that sense of both the emotion itself of greed, which is painful to me, to others. I'm just going to use greed as the example. I'm going to reinforce that sense. I'm also going to continue to reinforce the sense of I as being a separate entity. And this, perhaps is a step further into abstraction, unless we really go into selflessness, anatman, and Buddhism, and then how that's later applied to emptiness, or shunyata. But nevertheless, the point here stands that when I take a negative action, I'm not just hurting someone else, I'm actually hurting my future self. And when that result comes, the result is suffering. This is the linchpin of Buddhist teaching and how Buddha wove his particular distinct path into the worldview that was prevalent at his time, which is the Karmic Eschatology, the samsara moksha process, the liberation. So when we understand, or when we talk about karma, I think it's just good that we really keep, myself, I'll speak for myself. I want to keep understanding what it really implies, what it means in the context of Buddhist thought. Now, you'll see if you read this book or another book on karma, you'll see that karma really is volitional. So if we go forward a little bit, let me see if I can go forward just a tiny bit. Here's one. In the Pali Canon, the definition of karma is quite simple. This is a direct quote. As the Buddha puts it, it is volition, bhikkhus, that I call kama. For having willed, one acts by body, speech, and mind. Vasubandhu, one of the great philosophers in Buddhism, writing in the Sanskritic tradition, clarifies this slightly in his own definition. Karma is volition and what is produced through volition. So here we have this idea that our intention actually matters in terms of the cause and effect and our mental continuum. So, I'm going to pause here because clearly I could keep talking for a long time about this. I'm really looking forward to my interview with Roger Jackson. I'm sure we'll get into some of these granularities around karma and rebirth. I'm definitely going to ask him just more about that cultural moment that we started talking about today, that the Buddha emerged from and his philosophy emerged from. And I think there's just so much richness to really understanding this, if we're at all interested in Buddhism and also consciousness, without trying to extrapolate it or appropriate it, but to really try to understand it in its own lineage and terms, how the doctrine of rebirth and karma are interlinked and how they give us a picture for what really is consciousness in the context of, Buddhist praxis and history. May you be well.